any of the others. My name is Embree. I'm a professor in the Department of Computational and Applied Mathematics, and I'm co-director of the Rice Center for Engineering Leadership. I'd also like to introduce my colleague at RCEL, Dr. Tracy Bolts, who's a communications specialist in the school. And I will say up front that Dr. Bolts has a tremendous amount of experience coaching students both at the undergraduate and graduate level and delivering elevator pitches. So I certainly invite her to contribute as we go along today. She has other points to add in, or to correct, or contradict, or enhance anything that I have to say. And of course, the motivation for today's presentation is April 12th, the elevator pitch competition that's being run Rice-wide with abstracts due in just a couple weeks. And so I hope you all grabbed a handout when you came in, and that you also go to the website, graduate.rice.edu/elevator pitch, in order to sign up. I think hopefully what I'll do today is to convince you that this is a useful exercise and one that's not too daunting, but very rewarding. So first of all, what is an elevator pitch? Some of you know that terminology from maybe being involved in the Jones School, for example, but maybe it's a strange term to some of you and you're wondering, what is this competition that's going on? So the idea is that you're caught in an elevator with maybe a potential investor in a business that you want to start up, or the CEO of the company that you work for, or it could be maybe a department chair or a colleague at a university that you would like to hire you when you go on the job market in a semester, and you have the duration of that elevator ride from the ground floor of the lobby to whatever high up floor this distinguished person works on, to give them your pitch. And when the elevator doors open, they're off to the rest of their day, and you're lucky if you've had that whole time to give them your idea. Now, with everyone with smartphones, probably you only have half of their attention, so it's harder than ever to give elevator pitches. So that's the origin of the term, but the skill that you'll be practicing is useful in a far richer variety of settings, not just to pitch an idea or yourself, but also maybe just explain what you do to your family. Do you ever go home for a vacation or holidays and grandmother asks, what is it that you do? And you start trying to pull out the equations, Cosmos, and describe what it's like to try to do data fitting or systems identification or something, right? What is the language that we can use to explain our work, whether it's in history or in electrical engineering, to a broad audience? And that could be grandmothers, or it could be the person sitting across from you at your table at on a date, right? What do? You want to be able to describe things in language that others can understand. And of course, you have to calibrate that to the audience. If you're at a professional meeting of fellow electrical engineers, then the language you will use will be different than if you're at a cocktail party or if you're back home with family, unless your family is made up of electrical engineers. This has happened. Okay. So the term elevator pitch is rapidly developing into a genre of communications, and it's a genre in the same sense that maybe you might talk about a sonnet being a genre of poetry, right? Does anyone know what a sonnet is? What are the rules of a sonnet? 14 lines?
14 lines, certain syllables each line.
Certain number of syllables each line, certain rhyme schemes, and there are different styles depending on the kind of sonnet you might want to write. And if there are any poets in the audience, you'll know that when you write a sonnet, it may seem like a very constraining form. You only have 14 lines, you've got to get the right number of syllables. But as you try to write one, engineering the words into this framework causes you to be even more creative than you would be if you were writing free verse. Because you have to think so carefully about your options in a way that free verse doesn't require. And so often, what comes out of this sonnet form is inspiring and creative and really better than what you would have gotten without the constraint. So the elevator pitch is similarly developed into a genre, 90 seconds, with certain expected parameters that will challenge you to present your work in a more effective and creative way than you would if someone just stopped you in an elevator and said, what do you do? And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that genre today. And there are various different ways these competitions are laid out. The one that I think you guys will follow, the one that's done in the Jones School for undergraduates, and also the Screech competition that the School of Engineering and RCEL hosted for graduate students this past fall, uses a 90-second pitch. Sometimes, that's a long elevator ride, right? It's a very slow elevator with lots of stops maybe. But, so you're lucky if you have that long. So you want to get it more concise than that. And I guess when I was trying to think of how to describe this for someone who hasn't seen one, and you all will see one by the end of this when I show you some clips, but it's like a job talk meets a poetry slam. Okay, so you want the content and the richness of, when you're on a job talk and you're trying to describe your research, what is it that makes you special, that should cause someone to want to hire you, but at the same time there's an element of performance that's really there, more like a poetry slam or something like that. And that's an important aspect of this genre. So why should you decide to go to the effort in April when you have deadlines and everything else at the end of the semester encroaching upon you to make the effort to go through this competition, to risk public humiliation as well as public glory? And I noticed there are prizes of $500 for first place, $300 for second, and $200 for third, so you can win actual money. But why should you do this? I think that this exercise will help you better understand why you're doing your research. Sometimes as a graduate student you get so burrowed into your research problem and sometimes so frustrated with aspects of it, if you're like me, that you kind of forget the big picture. What was it that motivated you to join this research group or to tackle this particular text that you're studying or problem that you're trying to solve in the first place? So pull the lens back a bit and understand, why do you care? First of all, you have to convince yourself that you do care and hopefully rediscover or discover a passion for what you're doing. You also want to have the ability to present your work to a broad audience, and I've talked a little bit about what broad means. It could mean broad in terms of other researchers in your field, or it could mean broad in terms of your grandmother. I'm amazed how often our graduate students in applied math will speak to another applied mathematician and will completely miss the tone. They won't know what terms to assume are common across all applied mathematicians and which ones are specific to people that work on their problem. So even experienced graduate students struggle with this even within their own discipline. I say that when my students are ready to write the introductory chapter to their thesis, they're ready to graduate. Because that shows a maturity that goes along with I've been doing original work in the field. You'll get practice speaking in front of a crowd. And you may say that you're familiar giving seminars with crowds that are kind of like this. It's a whole other ballgame when you're in an auditorium with 200 people there and you don't know these people and they're looking at you and they're expecting a performance. So that's a good skill to develop. There's a higher purpose to all of this, though. It's not just to make you better as individual presenters, but we have a belief that graduate students at Rice could do a better job integrating themselves into our academic community. That when you came here and you joined Rice, you didn't join as lone gunmen who were doing their own thing as independent contractors. You joined an academic community that comprises researchers ranging from humanities to engineering and many points in between. And to be part of that community means you're able to share ideas with other people in a way that they can comprehend a novel idea. That you're fired up about your work, right? And that you're going to share that passion with others. And then maybe even collaborations come from this. So one reason to do this, one reason to participate in the elevator pitch competition is simply to help build that academic community. As you develop that, as this community grows, and I applaud Arnaud for the great work he's done over the past year or two to help build this up, as this community builds, you'll realize how enriching and fulfilling it can be. And you can be an important part of that. It's good practice to get a pitch down. You'll get certain phrases that embed in your head when you describe your work in other settings. But of course realize that this is a genre and it's an unusual kind of pitch. So you'll be tuning this to other purposes and you'll be more spontaneous in other contexts. Okay, what is an elevator pitch? What is the genre I speak of? I think there are a number of key components to it that I want you all to think about addressing. And I want to break it down like this. The time segments are fairly arbitrary. And you may think there are things that belong on this list or other pieces here that don't fit for your research. But these, I think, are the core ideas. First of all, you have to know ahead of time, before you put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, why your research is important. You have to have an idea of your message. What is it that you want to tell people about your research? What are the aspects that they're going to find most valuable? Okay. So once you have a big idea, maybe you type that down and you have a page of text, or maybe it's just something you have in your head. But once you know what you want to say, then you can begin to lay it out. And when you give a pitch, I think the first thing that you want to draw upon is some tone. you're going to be one of 50 presenters, 50, giving 1.5-minute presentations. So if someone's listening to an hour to 2 hours of talks, what's going to cause them to remember yours? First of all, you need to get their attention. They're still thinking about the last talk, and then immediately you're right up on stage. So what's your hook? Do you know what I mean by a hook? Remember that phrase? Something that's going to pique their interest. So if I was giving a screech about how Netflix recommends, the mathematical algorithm behind how Netflix recommends movies, I might say something about, don't you hate it when Netflix recommends a movie to you when you watch it and it's a complete dud? Okay? And I kind of have maybe drawn people who have no interest in mathematics, but everybody watches movies on Netflix, and sometimes, yeah, it recommends one that's not such a good fit, right? So that's just it. I'll show you a few that are better than that when we look at some examples. After you've gotten the audience's interest, you want to lay out a problem. And as an engineer, mathematician, I think that this is fairly easy for me, for us. I'm not sure how it works in the humanities, and so I want to talk about this a little bit at the end, because I want to better understand how you might regard yourself as solving a problem. That could be a problem within your discipline, or a way that the world has looked at a text, for example, that needs to be revised, or that's missed a key component. But there's something that, you're solving some problem, there's something that's motivating you to do this research. So you lay that out. And you have to lay it out in a way that will resonate with people. I recall coaching a student in my department who works on acoustic wave equations, inverse problems for acoustic wave equations. And that was the problem. We need to find existence and uniqueness to the inverse problem for acoustic wave equations. And if you were in our field, you'd say, oh, that's an interesting problem. Yeah, I see why that's important. But everybody else would struggle to see its relevance. Right? What the student was really interested in is pounding sound waves into the surface of the ocean floor, and watching how they reflect back. Knowing what went down, hearing what reflects back, and from that constructing a picture of the ocean, the subsurface underneath the ocean, looking for gaps for oil. So there's a beautiful mathematical problem there, but the problem that will resonate with people isn't the uniqueness of solutions to the inverse wave equation, but rather, how do you find oil using sound waves? So it's finding a way to present the problem that will resonate with your audience. Then you've done something to address this problem. That's the meat of your talk, and that's where I think most of the time should be devoted. I think it's also the hardest part of your talk, because you have made some difference in this field, but to explain, but chances are, maybe you're doing revolutionary work. I have high hopes for all of you, but I think many graduate students maybe do work that's a little bit more, less earth-shattering, right? In the sense that you're not causing a revolution in your field that's easy to describe. So the solution that you're proposing may be to a small component of the bigger, broad problem that you pitched to the audience. And this is the tension. You want to talk about a very precise problem because you're solving a very precise problem, but that precise problem is too focused for the audience at large to understand. So how do you present a broad problem, explain the piece of it that you are solving and what's novel about that, and then pull the lens back to the big problem in about 20 or 30 seconds. Okay, it's a real challenge. And so when we had the screech competition last fall, I think one of my greatest criticisms of these overall very nice screeches was that too often the solution piece was fairly generic, or it was oversold. That the problem was so big, and at the end you had the idea that the student was on the verge of conquering this major grand challenge that would revolutionize the world. I hope that's true in most cases, but maybe not in all of them. Is it true? Okay, so this is a really delicate balance. You're going to spend a lot of time working on that. So you have this novel solution. Why does it matter? Why should the audience care that you solved this problem? So bring it back now to the broader context. And then wrap up with a memorable line. What is it? What are people going to remember as you walk off the stage and they start applauding, right? What's the thing that's going to get? And then go back to your hook at the very beginning, right? And tie it all together in a nice package. The questions about these components. Yeah.
Kind of curious, how can we present something like a visualizable within this?
Yeah, Cosman was asking earlier, how do you get an pitches might allow you to use one slide. I think this one you're not going to allow any slides, right? And I think that's good because when you're on the elevator, you're not going to be able to, well, maybe now you pull out your smartphone. Or you start writing on the wall of the elevator, I don't know, okay? Be careful of vandalism. But I think the challenge for you is to use metaphor, okay? Can you paint a picture with language? And that's difficult. That's the challenge. And that's what distinguishes pitches that really soar from those that are far more mundane, right?
Is it allowed for us to bring some small data?
I'll show you one example where someone brought a problem. So I don't know that that's, I think if everybody started bringing their dogs and ponies in to show, it might be problematic, but you might think about one strategic problem. Okay. Here's my advice on how to prepare an elevator pitch. And it reveals another one of these tensions. That you want your pitch to seem incredibly spontaneous. It's just rolling off your tongue because it's just part of who you are. You're so passionate about this idea. But at the same time, you want to hit 90 seconds on the nose, and then maybe a buzzer or a clock that you're staring down that will remind you that you're running over or running out of time. Okay? So probably you're not going to want to just leave it to spontaneity and assume the words will come to you when you're in front of the 250 people before you. You're going to want to write it out. But then you're going to want to be able to deliver it in a way that makes it seem natural. So this is one of the challenges. So I suggest that you first of all draft it, and you're going to write more words than you'll be able to use. And they won't be the right words. So you're going to need to edit and prune and cut the superfluous words out. And this is great practice for when you're writing the abstract for your PhD thesis or just writing academic articles in general. You want to be economical with your language. Every word should count. But at the same time, you can take that to an extreme where you cut out so many words that the writing seems unnatural when read aloud. So reading aloud as you develop this is really a key skill that will help your ear tune your words. Okay. Consider rhythm, alliteration, repetition of key phrases. I'll show you one screech where the presenter uses the number 9, and he goes 9, and he keeps coming back to 9, right? And it's that I remember, right? I remember it as screech because of 9. So maybe there's some way to use language, and maybe the humanist will have an edge over the engineers on this one, that you can really make your pitch sing. Avoid jargon. Some of us are so immersed in our fields that we don't even know what jargon is. Is the word matrix jargon? Well, to me, matrix, what do? I study matrix theory, right? What is a matrix? Right? So, if you're outside of applied mathematics or certainly engineering, maybe matrix seems like a foreign term to you. Okay? So things that seem like jargon to you, jargon to your peers outside your department may seem quite natural to you. So have a very high tolerance, and then don't just say, well, that means I can't talk about complicated ideas. No, the challenge is talk about them in a way that other people can understand that doesn't rely on these code words that we all have in our disciplines. Okay. And part of this then comes down to the next step. Practice, 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 practice. And then when you're tired of practicing, practice a couple more times. Okay? Get it down so you're reading it aloud. Try it in front of the mirror so you see what you look like when you present this. As you keep doing this, you'll refine the language. You'll find those areas that seem so poetic when you wrote them out, but cause you to stumble every time you read them. That's a key idea. If you keep hearing yourself stumble over the same phrase every single time, rewrite it. Find a way to make it smoother so that it just falls off your tongue. Practice in front of friends, but often we define our friends as those people that happen to be in our research group. And so you start using all your jargon around them, and they start nodding their head and saying, oh, this is very interesting, this is very interesting. Because they're all solving the same problem, right? You want to find a way to talk about your research that resonates with others. So find those that are in different departments and different schools that you can practice with, who can say, you know what, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. I can tell you're very passionate about it, but I don't know what you're saying. And this is the first time when these pitch competitions has been tried with such a broad audience, so you guys are guinea pigs that are participating in this. So get feedback from people outside your group. Record yourself. Most of your laptops now have the ability to record. Phones, you have the ability to record yourself. That's painful. Listen to yourself give these pitches, and then you'll see where, wow, that sounded kind of clunky. I didn't realize how awkward that sounded. I hate the sound of my voice.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
With respect to the disciplinary jargon, I don't think that sometimes it's actually necessary to use it
from every school at Rice, then you need to be able to defuse that jargon. And maybe you just define it. Maybe I say, I'm talking about a table of numbers, and we call that a matrix.
Do you have any advice about how to define these boundaries? Because I know some professors that are related to the field, that they just don't remember, of course, all the jargon. So when do you use it, for example? When do you use jargon?
Yeah, so I think as you develop as a professional, you have different levels of jargon that you realize this is very specific to people working on my problem. This is specific to people in my general area or in my field of chemical engineering or within science in general or within the general public. And you have to read your audience and you have to look for cues from your audience. Are people nodding their heads back at you? Are they staring at the clock as you talk? What cues are you getting from them that indicate some level of comprehension? Are they asking questions back that indicate that they have no idea what you're talking about or that they're deep right in there with you? But that's very tricky, and that's a professional skill that takes a lot of practice to develop. I don't have an easy answer for you. The pitch itself is a performance, and so I think that's a key thing to remember, that you're going to be nervous and you're up there, this poetry slam aspect. You're delivering a talk in an entertaining way, and you'll be judged by your peers and probably as much on your delivery as on your content. So check out the room ahead of time. Will it be in Duncan Hall? In Embree Auditorium. So this is a large auditorium. You'll see some video later that will show you how dark it can be when you're presenting. The video actually is fairly dark. About 250 people, 300 people in front of you. That will involve your peers, your professors, outside judges perhaps. In that venue, it's possible that you stand behind a big podium, which allows you to put your hand somewhere and put a piece of paper somewhere, which is risky. We'll talk about that a little bit. And you talk into a microphone. It also allows you to take the microphone and walk out in front of the audience and give your pitch this way. No crutch, no cards. You'll see examples of both. Your body speaks as much as your mouth does. So how are you standing? Do you have a stance that indicates confidence? Are you kind of curled up in a pretzel because you're so nervous? Sometimes when I speak, my legs shake, so I'm nervous. Right? So, if you're standing in front of people, it's easier to be behind a podium if that's happening. What do you do with your hands? Are your hands pulled in tight because you're so nervous? Or are you using your hand gestures in a thoughtful way that has been planned out ahead of time to work with your words? So you're choreographing what you do with your body as you think about what you're speaking. And who do you look at? Are you looking out at the audience? Are you looking at the clock, which is probably somewhere in the middle of the room as it counts down from 90 to 0? Make sure you're not staring at the floor. Okay, some traits of bad pitches. A lame opening. You've lost everybody. The first sentence out of your mouth. They're tuning out. They're looking at their program, trying to figure out who's up next when their friend's speaking. And they don't hear anything because you didn't hook them. So you want a strong opening at the beginning. You can lose them because the pitch doesn't motivate a general audience. Your problem is too specific. And the more technical your field is, the more difficult it is to explain, the higher this challenge is. But if you present something to them that you think is a big problem, and it doesn't seem authentically like a big problem to them, they're not going to be interested. Too much jargon. So you've just defined what the problem is, but they didn't understand half of the chemical names that you just recited in describing why this tetracycline, whatever, or something or other is important. So they don't see why it's a problem because they didn't understand the words. On the other hand, and I think this is as much of a worry, the problem is just so broad that it makes it sound like, as I said earlier, you're overselling your result. You're not finding a cure for all cancers, right? You're maybe not even finding a cure for one cancer. You're maybe working on a piece that 10 years down the road might develop into a drug that could help 10% of patients with this cancer live for an extra 6 months. Okay? So you have to worry about being too broad and putting your problem in the right context. And then finally, many students get to the end and you're almost there and the clock's running down and you just end in a flat way. And you don't build to a crescendo that invites the applause that you deserve, right? That you just end flat. it's really hard to pull all this together, all these ideas and the words that you've probably memorized, and at the same time deliver them well. Some students are so nervous that they just blurt all the words out very, very quickly. They forget all the pacing that they had in mind, the dramatic pauses that they planted in their talk for emphasis, or the sentences, the key lines that they really wanted to hit home. They rush through those lines because they're so nervous. Okay. So your practice and your practice and your practice will get you all those delivery cues down. Nervous use of the hands or leaning or something that looks, that you lack confidence. Failing to make eye contact with the audience. You're staring at your note cards and whether or not you bring them in as if you want a card that gives you some cues in case you forget a word, or do you read everything? You'll see examples of both of those in the screeches I show you in a few minutes. Those things cause you to lose eye contact, so beware of those. You also are almost certainly going to see some of your peers freeze up entirely. That they get a sentence or two out that they've memorized well and the nerves get the better of them, and you're silenced. And you shift in your seat, and you look down at your program, and they look out hopefully, hoping a line will come. And maybe they start from scratch again, hoping that they'll pick up the thread. It's very uncomfortable. You don't want to be that person, but it does happen with some frequency, and we learn from these experiences. It happens to all of us. But that's a danger of memorization, right? Because if you forget that one word that was going to be the bridge to the next sentence, then you're off, and it's a train wreck. Okay, so I want to show you examples from Screech to give you some feeling for how these work, and then if we have some time, maybe we'll talk about a few hooks and problems that you all might have in your own potential elevator pitches. So first of all of the Screeches are available on YouTube. So if you go and search for Rice Research, one word, Screech, that user has posted all of the Screeches. They're grouped by the 8 departments in the School of Engineering, and the 3 winners, John Brame and Jason Holloway, Emily McCarthy, are posted separately, and we'll look at a couple of those. You should also look at the broad range, though. You'll see a freeze-up or two. You'll see students that are far too technical. You'll see some that are far too broad. Critique them. Say, what would you do differently? Why did this one not resonate for you? Remember that these were delivered to an engineering audience, so they're not quite as broad as the pitches that you should be developing. At the same time, you should know that these were regarded by people who watch a lot of entrepreneurial pitches as an excellent crop overall. I think they were stronger than what we see typically from undergraduates in the November elevator pitch competition at the Jones School, and I hear they're much better than the ones that are shown at the Rice Business Plan competition. So, as you critique, you'll see many points to improve upon, but know that you're looking at an above average